Oh, okay, yeah, this feels familiar. Mwah, chef's kiss. So good. Korn. Their career spans 30 years. I've been listening to their music for the majority of that time. A lot of childhood trauma, I guess you could say. Because I've been listening to them for so many years, I feel like I'm a bit of an authority on the subject. So I thought I would go ahead and do a Korn album ranking video. Right, without further ado, as you can see along here, they're all nicely organized into chronological order. So let's start with Self-Titled. Self-Titled for me was the album that really opened up the door to everything that I listen to these days. It came out at a time when I feel like metal needed a bit of a shift. Big bands at the time were, even back then, even as a kid, I felt were feeling a little bit stale. And metal and alternative music, whatever you want to call it, needed a bit of a kick up the ass. And this album really was the one to do that. And for me, it's invaluable on my musical journey. It's step one. I don't think that it's their best album by any means, which is not unusual, you know, for a band's first album to not be their best. I think that's okay. I think that's acceptable. I do think, however, that without this album, the landscape of metal these days would be quite different. If this album hadn't have reached as many people as it did, I feel like the whole history of music for the last 30 years would be completely different, for better or for worse. On this timeline, this album broke so many bands and influenced so many bands, and I love this album. It's incredibly important for me. Standout songs would be Clown, Divine, Chutes and Ladders, I think. I mean, Blind, obviously. I don't really need to mention Blind, but if I don't, I feel like I'm committing a sin. But I think this album is incredibly strong. It hasn't aged terribly well in terms of production. It's a bit rough around the edges, but it was supposed to be, you know, so I can't really deduct any points for that. Considering, you know, you put this alongside other albums that came out in '94, and it still sounds pretty fresh. For me, I am going to put this straight at S tier because obviously. The next album, Life is Peachy, for me was actually in a lot of ways bigger and more pivotal than Self-Titled. This was the first Korn album I bought off the strength of hearing a few of the songs off the Self-Titled album. And I went into a record store and I saw the album artwork in the, you know, rock/metal section, and I thought it was so incredibly creepy. I mean, that's what caught my eye initially, and then I saw Korn at the bottom. Bearing in mind I'm like 13, 14, I just started getting into this whole kind of world of music. And I'm like, oh, I know that name. I like that name. I like what I've heard, so I'm going to buy it. And holy shit, man, when I put the album in the CD player for the first time... I thought I was being invaded by aliens or something. Really, like, it was crazy. Twist was unlike anything I, or probably anyone else, had heard at the time. The album was a little bit rushed because of the success of the first album. They were like, you know, they were on tour a lot. And they were like, right, we need to record an album as quickly as possible. And so that's exactly what they did. And it kind of feels that way, but for me, I don't have a problem with that. I think some people would probably see this album as a bit of a mess, a bit of a rush job, and I think that's its brilliance. There's not a lot of overthinking ideas or trying to do anything extremely groundbreaking because they'd already just broken ground with the first album, so they can kind of just do the same thing again, which is what they did. I feel like the production's a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper. The song structure is wild and unpredictable. It's a little bit goofier. It's got Chino from Deftones on it, for example. I love the goofiness of it. That's, for me, what really, really works. It's heavy and goofy at the same time, and has some of the heaviest songs that they've ever written, like Good God, for example. I think it's aged better than the self-titled. I think it's just got that slight step up in terms of production, and I love it. I love it. For me, Life is Peachy goes straight to S tier, above self-titled. I know, what a shocker, right? Moving on to Follow the Leader, I feel like I might lose some people here, and I'm prepared for that. I've had this conversation many times. As a lot of people felt at the time Life is Peachy being a bit of a mess and a bit of a rush, for me, Follow the Leader feels much more like a mess than Life is Peachy ever did. It feels very long. The track listing is quite inconsistent, in my opinion. It's frustrating because I feel like there is an amazing album in here, and if you trimmed it down to cut out some of the weaker stuff, I think there'd be a much stronger album in here. And the riffs are great, the production's good. Follow the Leader, for me, missed the mark. Even retrospectively, it went in a more commercial direction, which is fine. There's no harm in that. I just didn't enjoy the songs as much, to put it super basically. They felt more contrived and less goofy than Life is Peachy. I feel like the songs, you know, Freak on a Leash, for example, or Got the Life, they're absolute classics, of course, but do they stand up to what's come before? You can be the judge, but this is not your tier list, this is mine. I actually think a lot of the deep cuts are pretty strong. Dead Bodies Everywhere, probably my favourite song on the album. And I don't have a problem with All in the Family. I know the band have abandoned that song because it's offensive and you can't say that stuff anymore. That's the one song on this album that does share the similar goofiness that is on Life is Peachy. And I like it for that. I don't care if people find it offensive. I don't. I'm not going to get offended on behalf of other people. But where am I going to rank Follow the Leader? Again, this is probably going to annoy some people, but for me, it's a solid B tier album. I don't love it, I don't hate it. For me, it's very much middle of the road. The artwork is one of their best, undisputably. I just don't love the album, and it has a lot of nostalgia for me more than anything else, because I don't listen to it that often, and so when I do listen to it, it's a nostalgia trip, which is great. I love that about it. The next album, Issues, is an interesting one for me because when Issues came out, 1999, I was very much on the Korn train and had relatively high expectations. And the album didn't live up to them at the time. I felt, unlike Follow the Leader, it was almost too consistent. You know, like it was perhaps monotonous, but I was a child and I was very wrong. I feel like Issues is one of their albums that has aged the best. It has a real strong sense of atmosphere. It's like it lives in this cocoon, Issues. And the interludes, while they theoretically should irritate me, they actually don't. I appreciate them for what they are, because this album is heavy as hell. And then the interludes are like a nice little, interlude. And they work. They add a bit of space to the slamming heaviness that this album has. Very strong singles, very, very cool music videos. The band were one of the biggest bands in the world at the time, and the budget for their music videos was matched for that. Some really cool music videos, like Somebody Someone. I remember that being on MTV and just being blown away by that song. But then hearing the whole album in its entirety didn't do much for me then, but now I rate it very, very highly. And we'll get to them, but I feel like their later albums were more influenced by Issues than any other album. And I'm okay with that, 100%. Issues for me will go S tier, above self-titled, but still under Life is Peachy. Although that is difficult. I'm a little bit torn on that decision that I've just made. Already, I'm sure you are thinking the same thing that I am, which is that this is already quite a predictable tier list. I know. They're just really good albums, so what would you expect me to do? Rank them low, just to be different? No, of course not. They're amazing albums. Now, Untouchables is similar to Issues for me in the sense that when it came out, I wasn't amazed by what I was hearing, because they were doing a lot of things that were unusual for them. You know, they were trying a lot more mellow songs, but also some really heavy songs. The track listing of Untouchables does frustrate me, even today, because it's all over the place. And, you know, track 2 is like a mellow song. That's a weird choice, I think, for Korn at this point. And I know that they wanted to let you know immediately that this is going to have some new stuff on this album, but I think you could have left the less typical stuff for a little bit later in the album. This the whole track listing of Untouchables is one of my main complaints of the album, honestly, because the production, I think this is, to this day, one of their best sounding albums production-wise. You put this on a really good sound system, it sounds amazing. And they spent a lot of time, and a lot of effort, and a lot of money making Untouchables, and you can tell. You really can tell. That elevates it hugely. Thoughtless, the song, is one of my favorite Korn songs. The music video was very relatable for me at the time when it came out. It's interesting because Untouchables, a lot of the lyrics and stories and stuff, or whatever, however you want to look at it on Untouchables, was incredibly relevant to what was going on in my life at the time, particularly Thoughtless. Like, that music video, when that came out, I was like, that's me. Oh, it's actually Jesse Pinkman.
What?
But I relate to the character so well, because I used to draw, I used to paint my nails black, I used to get picked on in school. It was like they were following me around in my day-to-day life and then making a song/music video about my life. It was really strange. So I was very conflicted about the album overall, and I don't hate it. There's only one Korn album that I don't love, but Untouchables, I am going to put it in A tier. I think I'm okay with that. Because I've listened to it a lot more than Follow the Leader, but I don't rank it as high as any of these three. No way. So yeah, I'm okay with that. Take a Look in the Mirror is an interesting one, because I've heard a lot of Korn fans crap on this album, and I've never really understood why. I see the reason why they do, and I just disagree. I think a lot of the feedback they got with Untouchables was like, what are you doing? You're doing so many different weird, unusual things. And they were like, okay, well, we're just going to do super heavy all the time then. I'm okay with that. The songwriting is less imaginative, perhaps. I think this is their best, one of their best albums to listen to in the gym, because it's very consistent. It doesn't have any of the weird experimental stuff they did on Untouchables. And I think people just found it boring. The only real criticism I have of Take a Look in the Mirror, or had, I should say, of Take a Look in the Mirror, when I heard it the very first time, I immediately noticed that David's snare drum was very different. For all previous Korn stuff, it was like a piccolo snare, where it's like a really short snare. It was a really sharp, clangy, kind of high-pitched sound to it. And Take a Look in the Mirror has got like a really beefy, bassy snare drum. And I'm okay with it now because I'm used to it, but at the time that was jarring. But that was the only thing about the album that was hard to get used to. The songs, great. They're all heavy. There's no, acoustic ballads or anything. So I really never had any problem with it. This was the last album with the full original lineup. So in a way, it's quite an important Korn album. After this, Head was gone, and it was noticeable. So it's the end of an era, this album, really. And I think more important than people probably give it credit for. But I am gonna rip the band-aid off and put it in A tier. Above or below Untouchables, though? That's the question. I'm gonna leave it there for now. I might come back to it. And the reason why I put it just above Untouchables is because Take a Look in the Mirror is an album I go back to more often and listen to more of all the way through than Untouchables these days. See You on the Other Side is a difficult album for me to talk about, in a sense, because I hate it. When this album came out, I was so hyped for anything Korn related, right? Previous 6 albums, loved every one of them in their own way. Some were slightly better than others, but I didn't dislike any of it. And so my hype for this album was possibly more than any other album previous. And oh my god, did they drop the ball. Oh, they lost Head, as I mentioned. Head was gone. And it was immediately noticeable to me. I remember I put in the CD, which I probably got day of release, or week of release, or whatever. I put the CD into my computer, and this happened. I think Twisted Transistor is one of the dumbest, low-hanging fruit, idiotic, ill-conceived singles they've ever released. It was so immediately disappointing. Like, immediately. I'm like, what is this? This doesn't even sound like Korn. It sounds like Korn trying to be Korn. Or it sounds like another band trying to imitate Korn or something. I hated it. I hated it so much at the time. I don't think I ever listened to it again. I think I got like 3 or 4, maybe 5 songs in and just took the CD out and I never listened to it again. I was so annoyed and I'm still bitter about it to this day, if you can't tell. I said there was only one Korn album that I don't love. This is the one. This is shit. I knew someone once who they had a huge CD collection and this was the only Korn CD they had. What are you doing? Everything about this album was terrible. Very thin, unimaginative guitar, for obvious reasons. There's 50% of the guitar missing. I have no problem with electronic production. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the drums sounded fake, and Jonathan's voice it sounded weird. The lyrics in the songs are just garbage, and they're starting to talk about, like, politics and stuff. We're like, what is this? What are you doing? You've missed the point of your own band. Terrible, awful garbage. Ugh. There's really nothing good I can say about this album, honestly. And the thing is, I've tried every once in a while, maybe once every couple of years, maybe once a year or something, I try to go back and listen to this album. Because I've listened to every other Korn album so many times that basically I could survive never listening to them again. Not that I would do that, because that would be heresy. But this is the one album that I've not listened to a lot. And so I think, well, maybe if I go back to it now, maybe my bitterness and my prejudice will have gone away. Maybe I'll see it in a different way. Maybe. No, not at all. It's still as shit as it was 20 years ago. So I have given it more than one chance. I didn't back in the day. I was immediately offended by it. But I've tried and tried and tried and tried. And I will never listen to this album again. It's so horrible. Anyway, I feel like I'm just ranting at this point. I have nothing good to say about this album. Coming Undone is okay. Everything else is just awful. It goes straight to D tier. If there was an X tier, it would go in there. But D will have to do. Okay, I'm glad I got that out of my system. Untitled is an interesting one for me because, full disclosure, after See You on the Other Side, I wasn't excited about a new Korn album. at all. Coincidentally, at the time, I'd started listening to other stuff. I started listening to a lot of electronic music. So Untitled passed me by. I didn't even know about it. I didn't see any hype about it. But when I came round to listening to it, 2011 or 12, maybe even later, I can't remember. I thought it was alright. Wasn't expecting much, because again, hadn't heard anything about it. I'd never heard anything from it, none of the singles, nothing at all. Hadn't even seen a music video. My low expectations were kind of met. I thought it was interesting. I thought it has a lot of atmosphere. It actually has the most atmosphere of any Korn album since Issues, which is good. That's positive. And bringing in other artists like Terry Bozzio on drums. And a whole bunch of actually different drummers. This was before they settled on their new drummer. To me, he's the new drummer. But I thought it was interesting. Was it amazing? No. But it had some interesting new ideas for Korn that they hadn't really done before. There's bits of the album that kind of almost sound like the Beatles or something. Very strange. But because it was strange, that made me like it. As opposed to See You on the Other Side, which was strange and shit. Untitled was strange and interesting. Was it great? No. Did it annoy me in any way? Also, no. It's got some of the worst artwork of their career. Holy crap. It looks like fan-submitted artwork from 4chan or something. It's really not good. It's a bit long, or at the very least it feels a bit long. But there's some good ideas. I don't know. I don't really know how much more I can say about it. I'm just going to rank it. I'm going to put this in C tier. Because it's not amazing, but my expectations were low and they were met. With See You on the Other Side, my expectations were high and they were shat on. So I don't hate this album. I just think it's a bit underwhelming. Korn III is, again, an album that I didn't come to until much later. Probably I came to both of these albums around the same time, because I'd been out of it for so long. It took me a while to come back and catch up with what I'd missed. And Korn III was underwhelming. I liked, on paper it was a cool idea. Going back to Ross Robinson and having a more stripped back approach, taking away a lot of overproduction and all of this stuff that had started to become more commonplace at the time. I get that. Fine. Don't inherently have a problem with that. Sonically, it sort of fits with Self-Titled and Life Is Peachy. If this had come out after Life Is Peachy, Korn wouldn't be here anymore. This would have tanked their career. The production is clunky and messy, and kind of by design it's supposed to be that way. That's the sound they were going for. It's not because of incompetence. It was by design, the sound of the album, to kind of go back to the grungy original sound that Korn had. I just think the songwriting is not very good. There's a couple of catchy songs, but for the most part it's quite forgettable. I do listen to it occasionally. If I've got all of Korn's music on shuffle and a song from this album comes on, I'm not having a bad time. But to sit through the whole album is a bit of a slog, and it gets quite exhausting. And yeah, I've not got much positive or interesting to say about this album, really. I think this is just going to have to go straight in C tier. I think below Untitled, because while Untitled is somewhat stranger, it's got more atmosphere than Korn III, and some more creative, interesting ideas, whereas Korn III seems stripped back in all senses. Let's take out all creativity entirely and just make a clunky, wannabe late 90s album. Now, with Path of Totality, this is where it gets really interesting for me. A divisive album among fans, obviously, but around the time this came out, what was it, 2010, 11, in the peak of, dubstep popularity. As I said, I was largely listening to a lot of electronic music at the time when this came out, and the electronic producers on this album that Korn worked with were also artists that I was listening to at the time. Skrillex, Noisia, Excision, Danzig. Like, I was already listening to these guys. And then I heard news that Korn were making an album with these producers that I was already into. And bearing in mind, because of, I was kind of like, well, those two previous albums were a little lackluster. If Noisia and Skrillex can kick a bit of life into Korn, I'm all into it. Let's go. Let's go! And, of course it has electronic drums on it, which is not a deal breaker for me. I'm okay with that. If the rest of the album fits that sound, cool. But, and this is a big but, the songwriting could have been better. I don't know, I keep going back to this album more often than Untitled and Korn III. At the time when the album came out, I was a little bit underwhelmed. Again, I think because my expectations were way up here, and perhaps they shouldn't have been. But I was so excited, how could I not be? Like, one of my favourite bands of all time is now working with artists who I've been into for the last few years, and I'm loving this new style of music. And they're coming together to make something together? How could I not be excited, right? But the songwriting was not the best. It's a real shame, because I do really like this album. Unlike a lot of Korn fans, just because electronic music bad. Fine, if you don't like electronic music, then you're not going to like this album. Of course, that makes sense. But to just dismiss it because dubstep bad or whatever, a little bit small-minded if you ask me. But I don't know. I can justify this album existing, and I do really like it. But where do I put it? Is the question. This is a tough one, because I don't know if I can really justify putting it next to Follow the Leader. That doesn't feel right. Oh, I don't know, man. I think top of C tier is fair. I wouldn't feel okay putting it next to Follow the Leader. I just don't. And it's definitely not A tier, but very, very strong C. And moving on to the Paradigm Shift. This, again, was a huge moment for me, because Head's back. And it was felt immediately. As soon as the first song on Paradigm Shift starts, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this feels familiar. Let's put it that way. It was very, I felt like there was a lot of compression on the drums, like a hell of a lot of compression. Not inherently a bad thing. I was just so excited to have Head back. And I think the band were as well. I think you can tell in the strength of the songwriting. As soon as he comes back, the riffs are better, the melodies are more interesting, the singles stand out a lot more. At the time it felt like, what was this, 2013? This really felt like, oh, this is what's been missing from my life for so long, and we're finally doing Korn again, like properly again. Okay, minus David. But aside from that, the melodic side of Korn is back. The riffage is back, the back and forth between Monkey and Head is back. All was well in my world again when this album came out. And some interesting, odd ideas, but nothing I disliked. And I've seen quite a few people rate this album quite low in their ranking of Korn albums. I don't get it. I didn't love it when it first came out, but it was the excitement of Korn's sound being back was undeniable. As time has gone on, in the last 12 years since it came out. Oh, God. I've grown to appreciate it more and more and more. I've got used to the overly compressed sound of it, and it doesn't bother me anymore. And it is an album that I will listen to all the way through. It's great, as far as I'm concerned, and a real strong return to form. I'm going to put this in... no. I'm going to put it in B tier... yeah, under Follow the Leader. That feels right, I think. It would feel wrong to put it above Follow the Leader because, while it's not my favourite album of all time, it is still Follow the Leader. It's undeniable. And so, following on from the paradigm shift, we have Sereity of Suffering, which... the paradigm shift got me excited. Sereity of Suffering blew my mind. I could not believe how good Korn sounded in 2015, whenever it was. I couldn't believe that this deep into their career, they sound so fresh and reinvigorated and just so good. This album, I listened to it over and over and over again when it came out. I couldn't get enough of it. I still think it holds up really well. I have literally nothing bad to say about it. It's the same producer as Paradigm Shift, and they've stuck with him ever since. And good they should, because whatever he's doing, he's nailing it. I think the artwork is horrendously bad. It looks like something that, again, it looks like fan-submitted art, but just, I don't know, it looks like a fever dream. I think this album is fantastic. It's way better than it has any right to be in this day and age, with Korn at this point in their career. Yeah, I love it. For me, it's going to go straight to S tier. Can I justify putting it above self-titled, though? That's the question. For now, no. I can leave that there. I think it's phenomenal. If you haven't listened to it, do it. Check out maybe the singles first and then the album, but from beginning to end, there's no stinkers on it. They really, at this point, and from this point onwards, they really nail how to get rid of crap, basically. And going forward, we get to The Nothing, which, again, I was pretty hyped for this album. Basically, from Paradigm Shift onwards, I'm hyped every single time. The Nothing did not disappoint. Really strong singles. The one that really sticks out to me and did from the very first moment I heard it, actually two of them, forgive me, was Cold. And Can You Hear Me? Those two songs, which were released before the album, the singles, they made me so excited for what was coming. And I listened to this album over and over and over again. Again, same with Sereity of Suffering. I just couldn't get enough of it. And it lasted for months. I just listened to it, and I'm sure everyone around me was so sick and tired of hearing it, but I didn't care. It was a very dark time for Jonathan, at the very least, because his wife, Devon, passed away, so he had a lot of demons to unleash on this album, and man, you can feel it. Again, I have nothing bad to say about The Nothing. I think conceptually it's great, and the songwriting is out of this world, the production's really good. What can I say? It's going S tier. I think... this is difficult. This is very difficult. Yeah, I think I'll just agonize over this for the rest of the evening if I don't commit. So I'm gonna put them there. I think I'm okay with that. It'll have to do. Requiem, which was 2022, I believe, their latest album. Again, I was super hyped for this, off the strength of the Paradigm Shift, then Sereity of Suffering, then The Nothing. I was super hyped, and it did not disappoint. It was so good. It was really short. It was like half an hour. It's like 33 minutes or something. That works to its strength because, again, there's no crap on here whatsoever. And because it's so short, if I was to listen to it in the gym, for example, it gets to The Worst Is On Its Way, and then it ends. And I'm like, it's over. Well, I'll just start it from the beginning again. And I'm guessing that's on purpose because it can't just be me that does that. But it's so re-listenable. Because it doesn't outstay its welcome. It's like ear candy to me. All these last 4 albums are like, they're just like... ear candy is the best way I can put it. It's so good. I think it's fantastic. Is it as strong as the previous ones, though? Kinda. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really have any bad things to say about it. It was a little bit more uplifting. A little bit more positive and kind of looking forward rather than looking back, which a lot of Korn albums tend to do. But I got nothing bad to say about this, man. I'm gonna put it top of A tier. Yeah, that feels right to me. All their newest albums are so good, considering the dip of the late 2000s, early 2010s that they had. You know, it was kind of a downwards trajectory for a long time then. But they brought head back, and they brought themselves back. What a journey of a discography. Every album is worth listening to, except See You on the Other Side. If you're curious, don't listen to it. It's really not worth your time. Everything else has something to be enjoyed on it. Especially everything in S tier is chef's kiss. So good. Their latest stuff is so good, and I'm really hyped for whatever comes next. Apparently, I'm recording this on the 20th of January 2025. Apparently there is a new album coming this year. I'm very excited. And when it does release, be sure to check my channel because I will be definitely talking about it. But yeah, that's my Korn ranking. I'm done and have no more to say other than thank you for watching. Let me know of what you think about my ranking and what yours would be. And if you love See You on the Other Side, you're an idiot, frankly. I'm joking. I'm just playing. I still haven't thought of how to end videos though, so I'm just going to say, go away.